And let's continue with the other selectors, what we have and how to deal with them. So in the styles options, in the styles, we learned about how to deal with these styles selectors. And this is the last type of selectors we learned, suppose. So UI element validation state pseudo classes. So we have some validation state selectors, and how to use these validation state selectors, let's see. Right. Technically, validation state selectors, we have valid, invalid, required, and optional. In order to understand, so we need to design one simple example. So yesterday we created one simple form. Right. So this is the form that we created. Yeah. So here we designed a simple input element. Yeah, this is the basic. We have this form, and in this form, so how to define the effects, validation effects, let's see. Actually, first important option is we have two basic attributes. I will show you. So input fields, we have required and optional. Actually, we have to define input, colon, we have required. So if any input field is required and they haven't mentioned any value into it, if it is required, then we can put a border, some 1 pixel solid and yellow, like this. So, and box shadow, I'm defining the shadow. So 2 pixel, so 2 pixel, 4 pixel, some gold like this. So there is the gold option I defined. Right. So shadow also gold we will define. Okay. Right. This is required. So if any option is optional, so we have optional, then we have border as a 1 pixel, so solid, and optional we will give as some pink color we have defined, and box shadow and 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 4 pixel, and pink. That is optional options. So you can see here in the design, so this password is kept as optional, means required is not mentioned. That is the reason it is having one effect. This username is required. That is why it is defined here. If required and important, we entered some name, that doesn't matter for it. Why? Because You are not validating required. You are just saying that if a field is mentioned as required, then show an alert. If it is mentioned as required, then show an alert. That means just put one color and effects. If it is mentioned as required, then one effect. If it is not mentioned with required, another effect. Then we can put a legend at the bottom and we can say that these color all are required. So these color all are optional. We can put that message at the bottom generally for users. That means we can put a legend at the bottom. We can put a legend at the bottom. So suppose at the bottom, so we have a div and align to center. In that we have another div, the style width is equal to 100, so pixel, and height is equal to some 50 pixel. Height and width is defined for this. And for this div, so we given background color, background color, background color, background color as some gold. And here in the div, we define that it is required. And similarly, another div here. And here we are saying that this is some pink, and this is optional. This is optional. Optional. And so here we have style display as inline. This is all we are going to understand. We are going to learn. You can see this is how we define the options. We given a legend saying that all these colored options are required, and these color options are optional. Just like a legend is given at the bottom saying that so all these colored fields are required, please fill them. That is not mandatory. You don't need this at all. We don't need to define this at all. Just I given you a point like this, it can be displayed. So only this is enough for example. That means if a field is mentioned as required, that means required means it defines effects for input element which is marked as required, marked with required attribute. If it is marked with required attribute, then it will define this effects. Similarly, it defines effects for input element. So when not marked with required, for example, for password also, suppose for password field also, dynamically later they defined required, then automatically the color of that also will change. If it is kept empty without required, then automatically color will be different. So based on required or optional, we can define effects. So that is one example. For that. This is for required and optional. For required and optional, this is one sample example. Right. Now, valid, invalid, actually. So it checks the validation state, the validation state. So for HTML element, validation for state for HTML element, and defines effects. If it defines effects if it is valid, if it is valid, it is valid. Similarly, it checks the validation state for HTML element, and defines effects if it is invalid, and defines effects if it is invalid. Based on whether it is valid or invalid, we can apply effects. Actually, the validation state can be verified in several ways. It can be verified in several ways. So actually, validation is verified by using min length, by using max length, by using pattern, by using email, by using required. So these are all the attributes. So these are all the attributes that we can use. By using those attributes, so we can configure them. Yeah, anyone turned on your videos, please close your videos. Turn off your videos because it is disturbing for others, huh? Right. So these are all the validation attributes. That means you are configuring the validation attributes. So if any one of these validation attributes have problem, then automatically it will display the errors. Automatically it will display the errors, right? So how we can configure the validation errors? So how do we define the validation errors, right? So we can handle these validations. So first, it requires general HTML validation, and we need to define the HTML validation, right? So without using any queries or JavaScript or any queries, we can define the effects and we can apply the effects. So let's see how we can manage this. Every element can have multiple validations. Generally, you can see every element have validations. Suppose, let's remove this required. So here I am writing option like valid. If it is valid, let's keep this as green. So we are giving the effect as green, right? And if it is another option is invalid. If it is invalid, so here we will set the color as red, right? So this is red. So valid, invalid, we are configuring the colors. Okay, now how do we verify whether it is valid or invalid, right? How to configure whether it is valid or invalid? Every element can have several validations. Suppose you see we have text required valid. Not only that, for that we are using some min length. Min length is 4. That means it should satisfy the minimum number of characters 4. And password is also required. Not only that, password have a pattern like A-Z and 4,10. That means password must be only uppercase letters, 4 to 10 characters. That is the pattern we defined. Already we learned few patterns, and I told you that other patterns we will learn in JavaScript. So if it is required and it is So between 4 to 10, if it is not matching any one of these, it will be invalid actually. Now you can see here, this is red. I'm entering some name, so still it is invalid. Why? Because it should pass another validation that is minimum 4 characters. So I'm entering minimum 4, it's valid. That's working fine. If it is not satisfying minimum 4, it is invalid. If it is not entered with anything, it is invalid. So it is configuring them. Password also same. I'm entering password. When I'm entering password, it is showing invalid. I entered uppercase letter only, but it is invalid because it should be minimum 4 characters. So that means I'm typing here. It should be minimum 4 characters. And if it is minimum 4 characters, now it is fine. And if it is more than 10 characters, then again it should show invalid. It should show red color. So it is showing red color. So if it is less than, then it is okay. More than 10, then it's any lowercase letter entered, then it shows invalid. Any lowercase letter entered, it is invalid because only uppercase letters are allowed. Any lowercase, it shows invalid. Uppercase are allowed. That is as per the validation pattern we have defined. That means an element can have multiple validations. It can verify all those validations and it can configure the validations. It can configure the validations. So technically, so that is the configuring of validation and defining the validation. Right. So when you are specifying validations, when you are configuring the validations, so you have to know first which validation you are configuring, and if it is not satisfying, you define some effects for that. Suppose this can be actually, suppose we have a div. So class as a form group, again I given, and in the label we said email, and we have a div, and input type is equal to email. I'm not giving any required, so I will give required. Okay, and you can see email is required. I'm entering email. I'm email here, some email. So still it is not satisfied. Why? Because email should have a proper @ and Gmail. Now it is fine. If anything is entered invalid email, it is not there. Because you know that HTML5 have a email validation with email. It have a URL validation with URL. Already we discussed about these types in the form concept. So that means it's not that validations are used with only attributes like required and all. It depends on input type also. Suppose input type you define number and user is typing some string, it will not allow. Input type you defined as URL. You can use URL, you can use email. These are the input types. They also have the validation of verifying whether the value is matching with that specific or not. That is actually configured and handled by using email. So generally we need the validation with the type. We need validation with the basic options like required, min length, max length. Actually, we can even define the validation based on in range, out range, in range and out of range. So you have another attribute that is in range and out of range. Attributes for in range and out of range. So if it is in range, out of range, So these two are attributes. So uh, it verifies the numeric range, the numeric range for value, and defines effects and defines effects. So when it is not satisfied, so when it is satisfied, so when it is satisfied within the range, so that means it verifies the numeric range for value and defines effects when it is satisfied within the range. So that is what actually in range. So it defines effects if input value is out of given range. So for this you have to use min and max attributes to find the range. You have to use min and max attributes to find the range. Whether it is in range or out range, you have to define that. So let's see, for example, this is another example here. This is the example for valid, invalid options. So this is an example for valid and invalid. So for valid and invalid, this example is there. For email, for valid and invalid, we are configuring it. Right. Now, how it works for in range and out range? Actually, suppose one problem is there here. The problem is it is not supported on every browser. We have browser issues also, technically. Why in browser? Because suppose you have defined some value range. Suppose here we are configuring the effects. So if input is in range, then it will put a green color. And input is out of range, it will put a red color. How you will verify? In range, out of range, how you will verify? So suppose I'm defining here a div and just a class as form group. And here we have a label called age, and we defined input type. Input type I given as text. If I give input type text and I am asking min is equal to 15. So max is equal to suppose 35. That means the range of age should be 15 to 35. Like this we have given, right? That is the input range. And you can see here, so this is input range. In a div, I am configuring it. I am configuring that age, okay? Now this is the range. I am typing a value 12, then it is not showing any error. I am typing the value some 40, it is not showing any error. Why? Because this text will not verify min and max. Because text means it will verify min length and max length. Min and max are used only when the type is number or range. Suppose if it is number or range, if it is number, what will happen? If it is number, automatically it changes into numeric up down. And one point is, already you know that you mentioned min, then I entered 12, it shows red. Because it is expecting in minimum 16. and some typing like 30, 38, then it is not valid. 35, it is valid. 36, it is valid. But one advantage is actually, you know that advantage is if I given a value as some 16 and 16 is the value, you can see when you scroll down, because actually 2 points are there. You can scroll up down. Scroll up down will not come on every browser. Some browsers can't show that. In that case, user will type. When scroll up down is there, there is no chance of going less than 15. And there is no chance of going more than 35 because you mentioned the minimum and maximum. Only that error you can see when you are typing inside it more than that. Typing inside it more than that, then it will show. Right? So depending on browser. Some browsers will support numeric up down. Some browsers will not support numeric up down. Some browsers, so you can directly choose from numeric up down. Then there is no chance of going outside range because you already mentioned the min and max values. Already mentioned the min and max values. So initially, this is the option how it defines. So how it configures. So you have to input a value and use it. And important, in range and out range can be used only for input type as number. So one more point here is you can verify only for input type number or range. You can verify only for input type number or range. You cannot verify for others. If it is input type text or input type password or any another type, then it cannot verify those values and configure the values. So it is important that it should be input type number or input type range, then only it can handle it. Only it can handle. So example is this, same. So no need of complete example, just some changes. We have to do the changes. So the changes about that. So that is in range, and out of range. These options we need to know. In range and out of range, just only some changes what I have done in this code is just we added some effects in the style. 2 effects we added in. So the 2 effects we added in the style. So this is in the style. So we are adding these effects, right? So in the style, we are adding those effects. And in the body, we are just adding some element. So in the body, we are adding just this div I will give. This is one enough to understand how the validation works. So this input range, so range and number, for only these 2 options, you can try this. So that is how we can use the selectors, how we can configure and use the selectors. This all comes under the category of validation selectors. Under the category of validation selectors. So we have validation selectors. So the UI element, validation state pseudo classes, right? Next important, after understanding the validation state pseudo classes, now we have another set of selectors. So another set of selectors. So we have in the selectors, we have structural pseudo classes. We have structural pseudo classes. So selectors. So this is the UI element validation state pseudo classes. And we have structural pseudo classes. So what are structural pseudo classes and how do we use these structural pseudo classes? So let's see how to work with them. Actually, structural pseudo classes, we have so many. Again, structural pseudo classes, we have so many. Generally, structural pseudo classes means these structural pseudo classes will be depending on the element's occurrence and its position based on parent and child hierarchy. That means you can target the effects. You can target your effects. So based on the position of element, in a parent and child hierarchy. So that is what actually the concept of structural pseudo selectors. We have so many structural pseudo selectors. So how to use the structural pseudo selectors? So that means based on the occurrence, we can define the structural pseudo selectors. Let's see what are these structural pseudo selectors and how to use them. Generally, we have a structural pseudo selector. Usually, it starts with these are all the attributes. Let's see what are the structural pseudo selectors we have. Means based on the occurrence. So occurrence. So here we have a selector and description. So this is selector pseudo class and description. Yeah. So what are the classes available? How do we configure these classes and how do we define the classes? Right. Let's see. First important in these structural pseudo classes, generally we have an option like so first child. We have an option like first child colon first child. That means it will target, usually it defines effects for only first child element of under, you can say first child element under any specific parent element. So it defines effects only to the first child element under any specific parent element that you can define with the first child. So we can configure with the first child. For example, suppose we are defining some effects. Let's see how it works, how it configures. Suppose for this, I will close and I will just put an option structural.html. Okay. Let's create a simple design for this doc type HTML head. Okay, then style. Fine. In the body, so we have a table. This table is having some width is 400 and border as 1. Okay. And in the table we have row. We can have rows and we are adding some rows. So we are configuring the options here. In that we have TV and we have some price, something like this. It can have a header. So it can have header, footer, and other options also configured there. So we are having rows. So generally, table have a T head and TR and TH. And here we have name and we have price like details. And in the T body, we are adding a row. And similarly, I'm adding some rows, table row. So this is some mobile, some price. And this is from Nike shoe. Okay, and some price. And so here some options like shirt and some price. And we are adding some details like jeans and some price. Okay. Now we have some data here. And this is all the data. Now we want to apply the effects for the table rows. We want to apply effects to the table rows. We need to configure the effects for the table rows. Generally, how you can configure the effects for the table rows. So in the style I'm defining, we know already parent and child hierarchy. That means we have T body. In the T body, we have TR, table row. And here we are applying some background color. So background color, some yellow. So some light yellow. Okay, light yellow. And you can see that it will apply for all of them. So it will apply for all of them. So that means I will open in a live server. Yeah. You can see that it will apply for all of them. That color is applied for all of them. It is applied for all of them. I just defined to make it dark here. So it is applied for all of them. But I want to apply only to the first child. We can configure the element like this. So we can use colon. That means apply to the row, but only to the first child. So only to the first child. Only to the first child. Then it will apply only to the first child. It will not apply to all. It will apply to the first child. So that you can manage by using this select. So that means it will apply only to the first one, So that is syntactically how we can define. This will apply only for the first one. Body is same for all of them. I will give the body also example here. This is first child. That is first child. Similarly, you have the options like last child. That means we have last child. Same, it defines the effects only for last child element under a specific parent element. Only last child element under specific parent element. So that means here I need to change it to, you can give different. So one is first child, another one is last child, different color. So here if I change this to last child, and you can see it will apply to the last one, So you can write both of them, one color for first one color for last one. You can define that. So this is generally how you configure for last child. So this is another example, same. So how we can configure for first and last element. Okay. That is for first and last element. Another option is you can define for any specific element. By using colon nth child, and you can define a number here. Nth child number. You can configure nth child. Nth child means, so it defines effects for specified occurrence index specified occurrence index number, child element. It defines effects for specified occurrence index number child element that you can define by using nth child. So you can configure nth child. Actually, nth child has options like, you can use the options like nth child options like technically. You can define a number. Define a number. You can define a number, or you can use odd even values, odd and even values, odd and even values, odd and even values. You can define a number or you can use odd and even values actually. That means, for example, here, so you can apply to any specific now. You can apply to any specific. You can configure for any specific. So that means how you can configure for any specific. So what you can do is, so you can configure for any specific just by using even and odd occurrence. Suppose you see here, the row, if it is nth child, if it is nth child, if you are configuring nth child, then it is nothing but it is expecting a number. Suppose I entered 1, I entered number 1, then it will be for first one. I entered 2, then it will be the second one. I entered 3, then it will be for third one. So 4, you can apply for fourth one. It will apply gradually. So index number starts for 1. So generally, usually index starts with the index number of child element. So starts with 1. It index number, because generally people think in index number means it starts with 0, but actually it starts with 1, starting with the index number. And important is you can even apply for even and odd occurrences, right? So technically even and odd occurrences, right? So what is even and odd occurrences? So the general even and odd occurrences is, for example, suppose I defined here odd, I'm using odd as a term, and then it will get to all odd occurrences 1, 3, 5, all odd occurrences one color. I can keep all even occurrences one color. That means T body. So T body, and in that row, in that nth child, and even. So that is background color. So background color, some line, that is the background color. And you can see that even and odd colors will apply there. That means even occurrences, odd occurrences. For even and odd occurrences, it is going to apply the effects and configure the effects. Technically, these are even and odd occurrences. Now, we are applying by using directly the keywords or by using the occurrence number. So example, we are configuring in this way. We are defining directly the odd and even occurrences. Or we can even use the occurrence index number. So occurrence numbers. So we are configuring the occurrence number, right? So occurrence number, how we can define here, we can simply say that 2. That means it will apply to the second one. So configure the second one, right? Now suppose if I return another option, nth child, then 3, then or nth child 4, another one. So that means one for 2, another for 4. For every element, different effects will be applied. Here, one more option is there. So for even and odd occurrences, you are defining the options. You have the effects which can be defined as nth of type. We can define the effects as nth of type. Nth of type, we have the options like nth of type, and it is expecting a number. We have nth of type and it is expecting a number. So what is this nth of type and a number technically? Nth of type and number is, so if I define nth child as suppose I'm just giving nth child as 2, then what happens is it will apply at 2 and it will stop. It will apply at 2 and it will stop. But if I define nth of type, nth of type 2, then what it will do is at every 2 occurrences, it will keep the effect. At every 2 occurrences, it will keep the effect. That means it applied at 2. After that, again, after 2 occurrences, it will keep that effect again. If the same element is repeating, that means you can see here it is applying here. We are configuring here. And it targets that nth of type. So that means nth of type. And we are specifying a number. So, and here what we have to do is for every 2 occurrences, it should apply. Then generally nth of type will use a number. So n plus 1. So here it uses n plus 1. So number n plus 1. That means here you can define any number of effects. Suppose you define the effect here like this. That means you say 2n. Generally 2n. So nth of type is 2n. That means here for every 2 occurrences, it will apply. Generally, if I say 2n plus 1, so that means I'm giving some plus 1. That means for every first occurrence and for every 2 occurrence. That means 2n plus 1 indicates every second occurrence and also the first occurrence. That means the first one and every 2 occurrences. So for example, if I define, that means you can just simply define number and here, so occurrence and you can configure n. So that means it will define the numerical value for that. So technically what it will do is it will repeat for every nth occurrence. That is actually nth of type. So that means if I say 2n like this, that means what we have to configure is, so syntactically you can define, so colon nth of type and 2n, you can define like this. So it will repeat for every nth occurrence. It will repeat at every nth occurrence and every nth occurrence and the specified position So and the specified position, every nth occurrence and the specified position. Generally for that we define the syntax as nth of type and 2n plus 1. So this is how we configure the effects. Example, that means here I'm defining the effects in this way. I'm configuring the effect in this way. You just have to create a table and apply that on the body section of that rows to that particular table. You can configure in this way. You can use this, or another example, you can define directly to n. That means every second occurrence it will apply. Every second occurrence it will apply. So actually we also have the options like, nth last of type. We have also options like colon nth last of type. So you can define a number. Usually this is for every nth occurrence from bottom. That is, you can say that so last to first. Actually this is from top to bottom. So nth of type is top to bottom, nth last of type is from bottom to top actually. That means you defined here. So, and it applies the effects here. Actually for every 2 occurrences we need to define the effect. So I am defining only 2n. That means for every 2 occurrences from the top, this is first one, this is second one. So for every 2 occurrences it is configuring. Suppose if I have one more row extra. So I have one more row extra. So I am configuring one more row extra, watch. And it will define here. You can see from top, for every 2 occurrences it will keep. So from bottom, every 2 occurrences it should be. From bottom, every 2 occurrences it should be. So then we can change this nth. So last of type, nth last of type. So that means from the bottom 2 occurrences. Not from the top. From the bottom, every 2 occurrences, it will configure that. It will define that. So from the bottom, it will define that effect, right? That is what actually the option, how it configures. So technically, you can identify the occurrence. So from the bottom or from the top. Similarly, you have option nth last child also. So you have an option nth of type. Nth of type means from the bottom. So syntax, everything same, just only you have to change this. So nth last of type, that means it will apply from the bottom. And the same thing you can define for nth last child. So that means you have nth child is second one from the top. You have nth last child. That means it will apply from the bottom. You can configure nth last child also. So you can define here nth last child. So n, that means it will apply. So it defines effect for, so for nth reference child element from bottom. That's what you can configure. This is nth last of child. For every occurrence you want, then you can use nth of type. For every occurrence you want, you can define nth of type. For every occurrence you can use nth of type. So for every occurrence from the bottom, nth last of type. These are based on occurrences. You can define. So you can define orders. You can define any specific element, odd occurrence, even occurrence, specific occurrence. Based on its occurrence number, you can configure. You can define. So these are actually structural pseudo classes. We have structural pseudo classes. We have in the structural pseudo classes actually. The first one, the structural pseudo class generally used is actually root. We have an option called root also. So actually root, it will apply for the parent element a root of the document. So generally we have a root also, root. Actually root refers to, so it refers to root of document. It refers to root of document. It refers to the root of document. An element root of the document. That means it is like generally like you apply for body, entire body. That means, so we have a body. So generally, so we have a root selector also. And suppose we say font face, font family, some Arial is the font family Arial for the body root option. Then important is at root level. So it will apply, not at the child level. These are all at the child level. So suppose something like, suppose welcome, something I typed here, welcome, like we can apply for that. So that means we can apply for these root levels, these font families we can configure. But generally, if I use directly like this, only root, that means because currently we don't have any parent root hierarchy, and you can see it will apply to all the documents. Actually, it is specifically defined for entire document. Actually, root refers to the document. So not to any root element. Actually, it refers to the document element. It refers to the root of the document. Usually, so that is body. That is body. So that means it will, root of document means body. It will apply to the body. You don't need to define body. You don't need to define body because root itself is body. And it will apply to the document and it will define that effect everywhere. If you want the same things to happen for every location, then you can configure this root option. That means same effects to all the text, same effects to all the contents inside the body. You can directly refine this root. So that is another option. We also have an empty also. So we also have an empty selector that also comes under the category of structural. Empty selector that also comes under the category of structural. That means if any element is empty, so without any content, then it will define the given effects, So that is for empty. If it is empty, then it will define the given effects. That means, for example, suppose in the table body, so T body. So in the table body, so we have row and it is empty. Row is empty. So then we set some background color. So we define some gray background color for that. Get background color for that. And here in the table, currently we don't have any empty. Suppose generally how it thinks it is empty. Suppose you have a row. After mobile, we kept some row and there is no data into it. We are not defining any data into it. Then it is empty. But you see it empty. It doesn't recognize the data into it. It is not applying that effect even if it is empty. That means we are configuring if it is empty in the table body if it is empty. So suppose why? Because actually this is not identified as empty. Generally blank means actually we use ampersand NBSP. So blank means ampersand NBSP. So that means non-breakable space. So this blank also gives a blank one, but it is not empty because row cannot directly handle text. Empty cannot be checked to the element for content which cannot handle text. Actually, row cannot directly handle text. Table cell will handle text. That means usually what happens is, suppose this is not defined with ampersand NBSP, it is normal. Now what happens is here, this is not table row. So here we have in the table row, so we have TD. That means table cell. Table cell is empty. That is empty. Then it will display that black. If the cell is empty, then it will display black. So that means if it is not defined with value. So here also it is blank is also a value. If it is not defined with value, then it will apply that. I just given that one blank because just to understand the height. So suppose, so we have that height, that means height as suppose some 30 pixels height for that particular empty, and you can see it will give that. So just 20 pixel, then you can see it will give that. So row cannot directly handle data. So empty can be checked only for the element that can handle data. That means either it is a paragraph, or it is a div, or it is a table definition, table data terms, DT, D terms, DD, DT data definitions, only for the elements that can handle data. So better we will give that. That means you can configure empty selector only for elements that can handle content, that can handle text, right? You can simply say that handle text content. So that can handle some content, then only that can handle text content, text or or any content directly, handle text or any content directly. For those only you can apply this empty. So this is an option for empty. So that means how do we define for empty? So this is example how we can configure for empty selector, right? So this is an empty selector. How do we define and work with the empty selector? In the structural selectors, actually, in the structural selectors, these are all under the category of structural selectors. So configured under the structural pseudo classes, actually. These are all structural pseudo classes. You also have an option of another category is, for all of this example is this. I will copy this example. In that example, you can keep changing the content at the top as I given in the syntax, and you can practice it. This you can change in every option, and you can test in this example. The style you have to change and you have to test in this example, right? This is actually the structural pseudo class, structural pseudo options. We are having this, right? Next important, we have pseudo elements. So we have another category, that is we have pseudo elements. We have pseudo elements. We generally call them as pseudo elements. Pseudo element selectors. We have pseudo element selectors. What are these pseudo? Till now you have seen pseudo classes. Pseudo element selectors are present. Pseudo element selectors, actually, these pseudo element selectors are defined with the double colon. We are configuring them by using a double colon. Usually they are used with the double colon. So we have a selector and description. What are these selectors available, and how do we define the selectors here? Configure the selectors. Actually, the pseudo select element selectors, usually pseudo element selectors, we have double colon. So we have first line. That is you have to use double colon first line. So we have another double colon. So double colon. So we have first character, first letter. So we have double colon, and we have before, and we have double colon, we have after. These are the pseudo element selectors. Technically, these are pseudo element selectors. Generally, pseudo element selector, first line, first letter, based on the content that you have. So the first line and first content, depending on where you are applying, right? So where you are configuring it, right? So generally, so you want to apply some content. So you want to apply some options, right? So for first line, first character, then you can apply this. Suppose you have some paragraph information here. Suppose we have some paragraph information here. So let's keep some paragraph information. In the same example, just we need some paragraph information. So we are adding a paragraph here. We are configuring the paragraph. And we are defining that paragraph. Okay. And there is a paragraph information here. Okay. Now here I am changing the effect in the style paragraph. I will use double colon, and we have the option like first letter. First letter. First letter, suppose I said, so color, first letter color as some red, and font size for first letter as suppose some 30 pixel, and font family for the first one is some Franklin Gothic, some font we have. So we have some font. I will just keep simple because we haven't learned all the font. I will say some Times New Roman. So we have Times New Roman. That is the font we are configuring. Okay, just this font I have defined the first letter, and it should apply that effect to the first letter of that paragraph. We can apply for the first letter of that particular paragraph. We can configure that so that you can manage just by using first letter. So suppose we are defining, so in a paragraph for the first line of the paragraph, that means paragraph, and we have first line. In the first line, we are configuring, so the color, so or font style, so font style as italic, so italic, font style as italic, and it should get that effect and display for only the first line, it will keep italic. So we can define for first, and for the first option we configured here. And we can define effects for before and after occurrence also, actually. That means, for example, so paragraph before, so before, so paragraph before, so margin, and paragraph after, so after, so we are applying some margin bottom, right? So that is some 30 pixel. Margin top, margin bottom, before and after here. Then see here, the before it will add some pixels, and after it should add some pixels. So that means the space between the paragraph, it will adjust the space between the content and the paragraph. Before and after is used for various other purpose, not only just for this paragraph. This is very important. In order to understand the before and after, we need to add some more content to us. So, which I will show you in several more CSS effects later. So that means when you are configuring, generally what happens is this before after will come. Generally what happens is when you are applying effects, I want apply everywhere, but I don't want to apply before that element. I want apply everywhere, but I don't want to apply after that element. Then you can configure this before and after. Currently, I just kept the margin. You can just keep the margin. So margin. So, but margin actually gets margin all directions paragraph margin will come. So that means top, bottom, left, right margins, it will be adjusted. So the better way to understand this before and after is to create one simple list type concept. Generally, we use this in working with navigation bars and all. With the list, you can easily understand. One example I will show you. That means before what you want, after what you want. Here we need an appearance. You can change the content actually. Suppose you can even put some content also. So before the paragraph, suppose I'm just giving some margin. Actually, before we can even put some content also. We can put some content. That is the reason it has a lot of effects. We will see later. We will put some content. That means we will put the content as, so before the paragraph, we will keep the content something like, so a note, something like note. We defined something like note. So before the paragraph, what should it have? It can have the content. You can see before the paragraph, it is having this note, having that note. So we can change its color because we are giving a first line color, first character color. We can change that first line and first letter. First line and first letter, just I remove them. So that means before the paragraph, you can apply some content. You can see some content, some note is defined here, right? You can configure some note. I will just keep here some content defined here. Then it will be like this. And this is paragraph. This is not the content. You cannot select that. You can see that is just a label through CSS. You can only select this area. You cannot select this content. We don't want that to be selected. If I directly write something like note, then it can be selected. Like this, so many effects are there. How to apply, we will see that, right? That means generally while working with lists and other controls, we can handle that. So these are some additional advanced options we have. So that is how to deal with these pseudo elements. And these are the last one in the selectors. Tomorrow we will see one example on this, then we will finish selectors, and tomorrow itself we will start understanding effects. Means fonts, colors, backgrounds, borders, shading, how to apply all of them and use them. Step by step we will learn about them, right? Tomorrow we will continue with this, right?